You know that embarrassing moment when you realize you had no idea what your colleague does? Well, Tim Fisher had that moment recently, but with all of you in HR. He's the head of AI at Black and White Zebra, our parent company here at People Managing People. And he spent years in leadership roles working closely with HR professionals. But like so many others, he thought the job was essentially compliance cops. And as he's been looking under the hood at challenges HR faces with AI, he's realized that this is the only function in most organizations that understands how massive human change at scale actually is. And right now, organizations are treating AI like a tech rollout when it's actually the largest organizational challenge since the Industrial Revolution. When he looks at the gap between what HR is being asked to do with AI and what you're actually equipped to do, his answer is pretty simple. It's a cavern. Today, we're going to cover why the most important thing you can do right now is get HR and tech leaders much closer, how AI is serving as a forcing function to finally ask, why do we do it this way? The authority gap that's being disguised as a readiness problem, and why successful transformations will be slower than your CEO wants and involve HR from day zero. I'm David Rice. This is People Managing People. And if your organization still thinks HR's job is to make people stop complaining about your AI mandate, this conversation from my colleague Tim is going to challenge all of that. So let's get into it.
All right. So Tim, welcome.
Thank you very much.
All right. So, you came in kind of like as an HR outsider. And I love this point of view because technically I'm an HR outsider, right? Maybe I'm a bit biased, but I think it's a valuable point of view. So what surprised you most about HR's actual reality versus maybe some assumptions that you had coming in?
I think they were all assumptions, I think it's fair to say. It's funny. So in my role, which I know we'll talk maybe a little bit about, but I get to spend a lot of time with different parts of the organization, sort of like in the consulting fashion. So there's this naivety that I have coming into every conversation in every organization, but I have to say, this is so embarrassing in retrospect, thinking about it, like saying it out loud actually to you is, there's this assumption that all HR is what I now know is called compliance HR, which is like, mom and dad at work, right?
Okay.
Where it's like big brother and like, this is the people you run and like tattle things on, but shocker, it's way more than that. And far more important to that and far more valuable to the business than that. It's embarrassing because I've been in leadership roles for a long time and worked really closely with people who I clearly did not understand what they did at all. So, it's been a big change.
It's not unusual. I'll say this, the HR folks get it all the time.
I'm sure.
But like, I think for so long, there was like this narrative that, especially like when I first started covering it like 5 years ago, there's a sort of narrative like HR is undervalued. And I think what I've seen this year is more that it's like misvalued rather than undervalued. It's
probably a better word. Yep.
Yeah. Right. And like you said, the assumption is compliance cops, but the reality is that they're the only people in most organizations understand how massive human change at scale, like how massive a challenge that is.
Yes. Yep.
And I think we've seen this year more than ever, the challenge tied to AI is a human challenge.
It most certainly is. Yeah.
I think, what's some of the areas where you feel like organizations are getting it wrong right now in terms of AI transformation?
So I think there's lots of places they're getting it wrong. I mean, I think you get to it. You said it very, very pointedly. It's just like it is a human challenge. I think so many organizations still see AI as a technical rollout, and while there are parts of that that are true, the reality is this is the largest organizational change since the Industrial Revolution, and it's not being treated that way, and it's not being handled that way. It's not being thought about that way. And I think, and I wouldn't have said this, a couple of years ago. HR leaders are the people who have to be the people that help make all this happen. But so I think not realizing that it's almost all humans, and then secondarily, and to our conversation, not realizing how important the human resources organization has to be to help make it happen. So
I'm curious because like now you've been looking at HR a little bit, and you're seeing some of the challenges. And we went to the Gartner conference down in Orlando, and we talked to I don't know how many different people down there, and I think one of the things we both realized is like everybody's in such different places with it. Like, it depends on industry. It depends on the maturity of the organization, or like, just a general willingness. But, I'm kind of curious about like, when you think about that gap between what HR is being asked to do with AI and then what they're actually equipped to do, how would you describe that?
It's a cavern. I mean, look, like you said, it's like nuanced, right? Like everybody's in a different position. So some organizations have HR leaders to spend time with their C-level folks and who have a deep understanding of the business and who are super close to their CTOs or CIOs. But most organizations aren't in that situation. And like I said, it's like the whole thing is change management masquerading as a tech rollout. So I think, I mean, this is so basic, but and we heard this at Gartner too. I think that the most important thing anybody could do right now is get their HR leaders much closer to their technology leaders. I think that's like the most visible cavernous gap at the moment. I think a lot of wonderful things would flow out of that kind of automatically, just like building that relationship. But that's something that I consistently see. And of course, based on the everything that we heard and the people we talked to, I don't think that would surprise anyone.
It's interesting. I was thinking about this earlier, and one of the things that's happened is like we had this narrative for a long time about HR getting its seat at the table, and then sort of felt like that kind of happened, and now they're getting. feel like they got brought in time for this challenge. But what I'm afraid is going to happen a little bit is this isn't going to be a capability gap. There's going to be an authority gap, and it gets disguised as a readiness problem, right? And so like HR leaders get asked to lead a huge transformation like this, but they're not given the actual power to lead it. So like they're being brought in after a vendor gets selected or after a strategy is set. And then the rollout timeline's been decided, but they weren't in the room when it was decided. And so they're told like, okay, you got to manage the people side of this. Well, that's just cleanup duty. That's not leadership. You know what I mean? Like that's not being in the core conversation matters. And so like, I think HR is equipped to manage this massive human change, but that's literally their job in a lot of ways. But organizations that treat them kind of like they're equipped to manage compliance administration, like we talked about at the start, right? So you get this bizarre dynamic where like HR leadership says, well, we need, or where organizational leadership says, well, we need HR to lead our AI transformation, so to speak. And then what they actually mean is, well, we need you to make people stop complaining about the fact that we've mandated that they use AI for this, and this, right? Or that they can't use it for that. As that's not like a valuable use of HR's time, I don't.
No, I completely agree with that. And I think in HR, and again, just with all my realizations about this part of the organization, I think that AI is going to potentially serve more as a forcing function than a thing in and of itself, at least in the very near term. And what by that I mean, outside of HR, I talk about this all the time, where organizations do what they do and what they've been doing for a long time. And, we maybe see like seismic shifts in the marketplace happen maybe a few times a generation, or, when you and I were kids, it was once a generation, and like all these big things, right? And so it's been a forcing function for organizations for the first time ever to ask themselves, why do we do something the way that we do it? Like, is this even the best way to do it? These are questions that they could have been asking themselves long before LLMs came out or AI was any part of the conversation. It's a healthy conversation to look inward and say, are we doing things the right way? Are they the most efficient? Most of the time a business will be bought and sold a couple of times before, or like, a management consultancy will come in and make these like big changes, right? And so AI has been this forcing function. And so I think in the world of HR, AI is going to be a forcing function to make organizations have that aha moment where they're like, we probably should bring in the people who work with our most valuable resource at the very beginning of conversations instead of to do, like you said, I think your word was like cleanup duty or something. Yeah.
So I'm curious, like what are some of the biggest implementation challenges that you see? And I mean like the unglamorous stuff that doesn't make it into case studies.
So I think one of the big challenges that I see, but I don't hear talked about nearly enough, is the different kind of working relationship between the, I'm going to coin them builders, the people who like automate things, which traditionally has been strictly developers. But as you and I both know, and all of us know, and even a lot of the HR leaders that we've talked to, like people have the ability to, build things on their own, or like, interact with technology in new ways because of LLM. So like whoever it is in your organization, whether it's like the engineers or the people adjacent to them, it's the relationship between those folks and the people who actually do the jobs. And that relationship is not something that typically, like, I came from a really big organization, like 4,000 people, and big verticals and like giant engineering departments, giant product departments, giant human resources, giant editorial, whatever it is, right? Hundreds, thousands of people. And the way these things typically work when, like, let's say a website needs something different done, or, I don't know, they need a design change, or they want to roll out a feature or something, maybe like the editorial staff will, say, we need something done. And there's this long, like, chain of operations that happen where an engineer gets a ticket to go do something. Those people never talk to each other. There's a big disconnect between, there's no relationship between the people that are building the thing and the people that like use the tool or provide information to it or whatever. But now we have engineers that are automating things and essentially teaching an AI how to do a job that they don't know how to do because they're not the ones that do them, just because they have engineer in their title and just because they're usually the ones that code. And so I know I'm sort of all over the place with this one, but like what I'm trying to get at is the people that like the users or the people that participate in the system are not the engineers. Typically, they're the ones that just like do the grunt work under the hood, right? Those people have to be much, much, much closer. They have to have. It's not too different than the conversation we just had from like a leadership perspective, where we're talking about HR. Leadership coming in so late to the game when all these decisions have been made, but down in the trenches, it's exactly the same thing. And so what we have are engineers being told by the business to automate something, but in an AI world, that means teaching an AI how to do a job that they don't know how to do. And so what happens is the people who actually do know how to do the job are coming in so late that it's not doing the job properly. And so that's like a very unsexy, complicated, messy sort of situation that isn't getting talked about enough. Like the entire way in which we build products and that we run projects and that we do all the things that every business on earth does has to fundamentally change because of these tools that we are treating like they're little robotic people, but we're still in some way programming like they're traditional software programs, and that's just like it's not how this is going to be successful. That's one big one. Another one, and we've already used this word 1,000 times, change. I mean, people hate change. Even like a really, really, really well-designed like AI agentic system that slips right into some digital workflow or something, it's not going to be adopted. People won't use it if you don't figure a bunch of stuff out. Like again, I just talked about this. Was the team like involved from the start, just as the technology folks were? Are people being educated on how to use it? Is there like a feedback path? Like, how do I tell an agent that's not doing its job properly? Are the right humans in the loop? We hear about this phrase all the time, humans in the loop. But the right people at the right places in like this new workflow where something gets done? Oftentimes it's not. Is there overhead being added back in around like where the AI is put in? Like, is there overhead to like interact with the AI at the start of the workflow or like do something with the information it produces? There's all these like really complicated questions. And so many people in leadership still see AI as a magic button. It's like, well, I just went to ChatGPT and made my like itinerary for my Paris trip. And so I expect the same sort of magic button behavior internally here. And it just doesn't work like that. It's just, it's a lot harder than it's a lot harder than it appears, I guess. So those are the two big things that come to mind, like the change, and then just the different working relationship that the people who build things in organizations have with the people who use things in the organization.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like, well, it's changing the dynamics of like so many different roles, right? Like I think about like a UX designer or or even like a UX writer, right? That was like a role for a while, and you just like kind of advise or like say what something should look like or feel like or read like, and now like you can just build the whole thing and then be like, hey, can you make this better? And then that's what the engineer, like you could basically just like come with like a prototype, and then they just have to make that fine tuned and make sure the back end works and all that. But like, it's just changed the entire dynamic of so much work. And I think about like the opportunity that exists there, but also like the creep factor of like, actually, should that person be doing that?
We all have these, we've all worked with, maybe like with CEOs or other leaders and stuff where you're like, oh, he's playing designer again, or like whatever it is, right? Everyone has an opinion. And so I say, now that everyone is empowered to demonstrate that maybe in a larger way. There's two sides to that. Yeah. Like I am not a designer in any way, shape, or form. I struggle with stick figures. And so when I'm trying to articulate an idea, these tools are very powerful for me because I can describe it in a language that I understand and I know the LLM understands, and then an image generation model or a coding model can draw something up or literally create a prototype, and that allows me to communicate in a way that I've never been able to communicate with my designers or my engineers or my product people before. But that is a dangerous place for some people to be, because it certainly could, if I wasn't disciplined enough, it could encourage me to push my organization down a path that maybe wasn't particularly high quality, simply because it was easy for me to show it off. And that's definitely something to watch out for. Yeah.
You didn't get into human resources to chase timesheets or wrestle with payroll errors. But when your systems don't communicate, you get dragged down. That's where Intuit QuickBooks Payroll comes in. QuickBooks Payroll is your business management solution that connects HR, payroll, time tracking, and finance in one powerful platform. AI and automation do the heavy lifting. No silos, no steep learning curves. QuickBooks Payroll can help you cut down on the chaos and focus on what matters most: being a human resource. Better systems lead to better people management and better workplaces. Discover how QuickBooks Payroll can help you today. Learn more by going to quickbooks.com/payroll. That's quickbooks.com/payroll. It's going to be interesting. I think one of the things that we came across in 2020, or two things that we came across in 2025 that I'm curious to see how we're going to address in 2026. The first is like the AI sabotage part, where it's like literally people are just using it poorly on purpose to get poor results and essentially turn that over, or to like make a case that it's not working. And then the other thing is shadow usage, where people are doing all kinds of things that we don't know about. And I think shadow usage isn't in and of itself problematic, in the sense of like, it's okay if people like want to develop different skills or like try their hand at some other thing. But it does get into a problem area where like they're just not doing what they're meant to be doing at all, like, or they're putting company stuff into things that you haven't paid for and things like that. That can get to be a bit of an issue. And I'm not sure how this is going to shift, but I think it's got to be a conversation that starts with trust around, we trust you to do your work. We trust, we want you to trust us that you're going to be here tomorrow, for one thing, because I think that's part of that anxiety is driving a lot of it.
I definitely think just a quick sidebar. I think a CISO might disagree with your shadow usage is okay perspective.
No, for sure,
but,
they would.
There are definitely some considerations there, but those are very manageable, and I agree are not the real problem. The sabotage and the concern. Look, again, I use this phrase all the time. I think it could have been any technology, like any big disruptive technology, but it's all just a forcing function. Like, organizations are going to have to figure out, are we going to, are we going to go the path of like radical honesty and transparency? And are we going to, think about what people will do with their time before we talk about what the things we take away from them? Do we, I hear very little conversations around, like there's this sort of like high level, well, everybody gets to level up. Everybody gets to do work that AI can't do. And while in and of itself, that might be a potentially true statement, I don't hear organizations talk about it very often. Why isn't that part of the conversation at the beginning? It should be. I think the world used to move so slowly that we sort of wiggled our way through the change almost by accident. And this is moving too quickly. It requires organizations to be purposeful and thoughtful. And I don't see a lot of that going on, unfortunately. So,
yeah, no, it's even just like the, use cases. People are scattershot and thinking about which ones they want to consider. I'm curious, because another thing we've seen this year is a lot of people chasing quick wins, productivity, efficiency metrics, right? That being like people's sort of North Star. And I think 2026, certainly, I think by the time we got to the end of 2025, a lot of people have realized like, well, that's not actually going to justify the investment, or that's not actually going to be sustainable over the long term or differentiate us much. So what are some of the ways people can kind of get out of that mentality and think more holistically? Because I think when we say AI transformation, sounds cool, but a lot of people look at it and they go, oh, yeah, all right, well, what does that mean? It's like, how should they be thinking about it?
I think it's actually okay to think about it in two different ways at the same time. I think that total transformation, like literally rethinking how everything gets done in your business, because there is a groundbreaking set of tools that didn't exist when all those processes were put together, has to happen. That's top down. So like, how do I zoom all the way out? How do I blow everything up? Not actually, but how might I rebuild my business from scratch if these tools were available today, which is what every startup is doing, right? How do I do that? But also recognize that is not the same thing as a series of quick wins added together. So an organization needs to think longer term and top down. How do we change? And they also need to be practical and think bottoms up and ask themselves, well, what are ways that we can use AI in quicker win ways to augment the poor processes we have right now and get some ROI for that investment? But it's a really, really tempting thing to confuse the bottoms up work with total transformation, and it is not the same thing. You can plug every hole and swap out every joint in a workflow, and that doesn't mean that the organization looks like what the startup is putting together in your world that is not in encumbered at all by anything that happened yesterday or the way anybody did anything last week. So organizations have to do a really complicated thing, which is work on total transformation slower and in a more appropriate way, as well as get the most out of some of the stuff they can in the short term, if that made any sense. We both work at a place, and we've all worked at different places, and we know how easy it can be to live in the here and now. And so it's extraordinarily, it requires a lot of discipline to do both of those things simultaneously. Yeah.
The other piece to this, like we talk about change management, we talk about the technology itself, we talk about sort of the human challenge, right? But there's another problem where it comes down to leadership alignment. And if you haven't got good alignment from the top, and people are, it's not even just about like messaging, it's just about sort of like understanding how what you're doing with it is feeding the bigger mission. If that's not there from, across the C-suite, and then even down one level, down to your directors or managers, you're not gonna find the results that you want. I mean, yeah. Is the disconnect there though between like, is it AI strategy overall, or is it like the integration into workflows?
I think it's both. I know I have AI in my title, but one of the fun things I like to say is it doesn't make any sense. Like I actually don't think, I think, again, like I'm going to use this phrase again, I need to put it on a t-shirt. I think it's a forcing function for change. I think what every organization has to figure out is, or the question they have to answer is, what does change look like at this organization? How much can we take on per unit time? What is our plan for completely reinventing our business? So I think it's about every organization building a capability of constant internal transformation. And you have to figure out how to do that without changing everyone's job descriptions every 7 days. And you have to figure out how to do that in a way that allows you to communicate coherently to your organization around like what you're doing and why, when sometimes you're figuring it out as the CEO, like all along the way. That's just like, that's a dynamic that hasn't existed before. It's like, even the I'm gonna go a little off here for a second, but even the idea of like a job description, like I think we all still inherently do this thing where we see a job description, we apply for a job, and we expect that job is going to be what we do for maybe the rest of our lives. That world doesn't exist anymore. And so like, how does the entire world adapt or start becoming comfortable, kind of being uncomfortable all the time, and being sorry, I always philosophize. I can't help myself. But I think these are real, as sort of like floaty as some of these concepts are. The reality is, I don't even remember what you asked me. I think it's so complicated because no one has ever in the history of the human race been in a situation where in their lifetime they're going to have to go through, and I mean individuals and organizations, they're going to have to go through rounds of change that only happened over generations before. That's a fundamental shift in work. And if we're still treating HR people like they're second-class citizens in the organization, and we're still thinking about hiring and retention the same way that we did even 5 years ago, and we're still thinking of technology as like something that sits over in one corner of the office, like none of this is going to work. But how to get from here to there is really, 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 really unclear.
Yeah, I think one thing that we realized, like the more you listen to, I don't know if you go to any, you've been to several conferences. I've been to quite a few webinars lately. And the one thing I keep realizing is like, nobody really knows what they're doing.
No.
You know what I mean?
No. No.
But I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, they invent the printing press and all of a sudden there's like a wave of exploratory things within literature, within philosophy, within just thought, like human thought, right? Because we could now communicate it in such a different way. And I'm like, this is like a new wave in like how we're going to process information for ourselves, you know, not as a society necessarily, but just like on a personal level, how you process information is likely going to change very drastically in the next 5 years. Same way as it did during the internet, as the internet became the norm.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that'll be 2 of those changes in my lifetime. Now, the people who went through the printing press, I can't say for sure that they didn't experience any other wild changes, but I'm guessing that life just moved a lot slower back then. And that was the big shift of that time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's a lot of stress on modern humanity that it just feels like all these changes keep happening like every 10 years. You know, it's like I've seen the internet, social media, and AI now, and I'm not even 45.
I mean, I think the cleanest way to say it is we're not wired for this. Like this isn't, we're not made to adapt at this level this quickly. But we have to figure it out.
No, I know. I think part of it is like, and this is kind of a weird thing to say at this particular, you know, moment, but I think everybody's got to get a little bit more comfortable being a bit philosophical, like, and being a bit like existential. Like, okay, well, what is our purpose? Because in 10 years, I mean, it doesn't take much to see the reality where, like, in 10 years, like, what is it that we do? You know, like, and like, be very specific. You said earlier that the level up thing, and the number one thing that's always driven me nuts about the AI conversation in the workplace is like, well, it's going to free people up to do all these other things. I'm like, okay, like what? And nobody ever says anything. Nobody ever has the answer to that question. And I'm like, well, if you're going to keep saying that, somebody's got to tell me what that is at some point.
I mean, look, I think there are some specific, you know, even departments and organizations and stuff like that, where like you could see where, boy, if you know, if my marketers had more time to do X, if they weren't in spreadsheets or whatever, that would be amazing for this department or this organization or whatever. But you know, I think much more often than not, the answer is not at all clear. And certainly at a really high level, like on a societal level, it's definitely not clear. You know, but I made a comment to someone a few months ago that like, we don't have time to wait for the philosophers to like write books. Like we have to be them. We have to figure this out as we go. One sort of like an analogy or metaphor always messes up. It was like, you know, building and flying the plane at the same time. And I remember I was super happy when the image generators got good enough that I could start whipping out those in like very specific slides and decks as I was giving presentations, because it was such a great way to describe how we were even thinking about AI inside of the organization that I was in. Because, and I think it's an honest way to talk about how, you know, someone's not sitting around with all the answers and we're trying to get them on the phone or you know, or read their book. No one has them. No one has them. It's you know, when you get to a point in your life when you realize for the most part, no one's got their hands on the wheel anywhere and everyone's just sort of winging it. I remember you know, into adulthood when I had that moment, you know, politics and business and everything. And I think it's never been more clear as right now. And as scary as that is, it's also okay and normal. It's just, it's a little frightening all at the same time.
So let me ask you this. What was your biggest, you know, I didn't expect this moment in 2020?
Oh, is this like what surprised me on my bingo card? Because that's a much larger conversation. If you mean like with AI in general or my job or
like with AI in the workplace, I'd say. I
think I'm surprised that so many people do use it and pretend they don't. I've seen the numbers over, you know, it's a lot, you know, like, I don't know, more than half of the people in organizations where they're not allowed to use it at all, use it every day. And, you know, just like at a really high level, like, I mean, it's a really high percentage. I don't remember the last report that I saw, but it was very, very high. even though like the organizations themselves don't report that sort of usage. So people are using their own personal accounts and things like that to do work. And so I think it's interesting that there's like two sides or like a dichotomy or something between the way people talk about how much AI scares them and then the reality of how much they use it. I think it's a testament to how incredibly effective as of a knowledge tool that it can be, and how if you use it properly, like a partner, it can be really, really productive and not particularly scary. But I think the numbers surprised me, honestly. I think we just recently celebrated like the 3-year anniversary of ChatGPT. I think it was last month or something, a few months ago. And I thought by now that either, and maybe we do this with all things, but I thought it would be more extreme one way or the other. I thought that there would be an enormous pushback and organizations would ban it and people wouldn't want to use it, or it would be maybe even a little more integrated into everything we do, maybe more officially. But I don't know, like no one has a crystal ball and it's been interesting to watch, but I think I'll quit rambling and say I'm surprised how many people use it every single day, how many people already treat it like it can't go away. And that's a testament to something really, really effective. But, all at the same time, we see all the numbers about, how so few organizations have rolled out like truly official, use cases and like, permanent implementations of like AI. But again, I think just take us back to the sort of top down and bottoms up transformational work. I think bottoms up work is just so much easier. It's so much easier for individual people who do very specific things and understand their jobs deeply to make a connection very, very soon that, if I made this automation or I had ChatGPT do this for me, that my job would get better. And those things happen sooner than, we've reinvented marketing at our company. Those are harder.
I would say, from my perspective, maybe the discourse mismatch. But you know what I'm going to hand my biggest surprise to? We had an episode of the podcast where somebody, people write in, and some guy somewhere found a way to use it to write pickup lines for his coworkers, and I was actually just really impressed with the ingenuity. Like, is he feeding it their Slack conversations and then making like really nuanced ones?
I'll roll my eyes and say humans. But like when you think about it, like even as this getting nerdy for a second, like all the AI work that happens every time you talk to ChatGPT, it's actually happening on something called a GPU. It's a video card for those of you that know anything about computers. It's the thing that makes your video games work that's in your PlayStation 5. They're in a room stacked on top of each other, and that's what runs AI. And some of it's just, I think about that a lot because I think about how so much ingenuity actually starts with like fun or silliness. I remember when ChatGPT came out and everybody said, right away, everybody was writing stories and poems. They were having to do creative things because that was like, wow, a software program did something kind of novel, which is not something software does. And I remember hearing over and over again, I said in meetings at my previous employer, and they're like, this is useless. There's no value here. And some of us would say like, well, just zoom out one level. It is a tool that understands and produces language. Like, I'm sure we can do something with that. We're a company that deals in language all day long. And it sometimes takes longer. So as funny as the pickup line thing is, that's probably the beginning of what will, become something productive, because it seems like that's just the way it goes every time. So.
I mean, you obviously follow all this stuff as close as I do. I gotta ask you, like, when you hear the AI discourse and the way that it's changed in the last year, what do you think about that? Like, because a year ago we were having conversations about things that we probably don't even I don't even think we think about it now. Some of it. But, I
Yeah.
think like right now, I'd say like, I don't know, we've gotten to the point where probably 70% of the conversation I see like on LinkedIn is pretty technical, where it's like either scientific or practical implementation stuff. Maybe 10% of it's like bubble talk, like financial stuff. And then like 20% is about the people challenge, right? And some of that gets pretty clickbaity, but I don't know. Like, what are we not talking about enough in this conversation?
Yeah, I think I'm a fan of the movement of those numbers, in the sense that it was so much doom and gloom and clickbaity stuff, for a while. The only thing you could find in the public discourse was, we're all going to die. Yeah, we're all going to die, or we're every disease will be cured by December. It was one of the two. And obviously, anyone who actually understands how it works or pays attention, rolled their eyes at both of those things. And the only practical conversations were sort of deep in the technical. They were in like the forums where people were like coding with it, and people conversations that eventually turn into startups and things like that. People are like, okay, there's some low-hanging fruit here that based on just the basic understanding of how all this works, we should be able to pull this off. And so that's been really cool. And so I think the practical is starting to get a little more common. What I would like to see is and again, maybe this is just my nerdiness and what I enjoy talking about and figuring out, but like, using technology to solve problems is really exciting to me. And I actually don't get a big kick out of like the image generation or the video or anything like that for the purposes of simple entertainment. I'm in the background, like, getting excited about an N8N workflow or a Zapier workflow or something, because I'm like, there's this thing I hate doing that I could make go away, or there's this thing I always wanted to do, and I would need an army of humans to pull it off. Even just like basic things like, I'm a consumer of lots of types of information, and I would love an AI system that reads it all for me and sends me a digest at the end of the day and says, here's what happened in the world of XYZ. That sort of exists, doesn't really, like, those are the things exciting to me. I would like to see more of that conversation happening. The things that are sort of happening in the bowels of companies, where it's just, it's like talking about workflows and things like that, which isn't a very sexy conversation, but so I guess what I'm saying is, I would like the practical conversations to shift, or they don't have to shift. I would like more practical conversations to happen in public, in addition to the ones that are happening that are really, really tech focused. Because we read a lot about those, like people, coding and stuff like that. It's all very cool and very practical and very helpful. But there's so many other ways that these tools can help other parts of the business outside of engineering, and certainly at home and stuff like that. So I would like to see that happen. My fear, however, is that media organizations are just gonna, I don't know. My fear is it's just gonna, the conversation about a bubble are just gonna like get more and more and more and more. It's too tempting to write articles that people will click on, instead of ones that they might find actually useful. So
yeah, I think the part that scares me a little bit is like, we saw the reaction to when like the Google VO stuff came out, and we started seeing all this like AI video proliferation, and same thing with Sora, right? And so like, there was sort of this like, you can't trust anything, like we don't know what's real, and there'll be more of that. It'll get more sophisticated. And the problem is like the next tool, whatever that is, the reaction to it, like these things tend to get more and more toxic. And then you keep finding out about like, oh, there's this guy in Sri Lanka who uses it just to create these specific types of videos. And so like the discourse around it will continue to, as it gets used to like spread misinformation. I don't know. I think that we end up in a place with discourse around things after a certain period of time where like there's just so much entrenchment and toxicity that there's no conversation to actually be had anymore. And I you know, the speed at which this is advancing, I worry that that might become a possibility. So I think,
you know, I commented earlier about how we're not wired for this. There was never any natural pressure whatsoever to adapt this quickly to anything. Nothing in the world changes this fast naturally. And, you know, we also get tired. The news cycle, the change cycle, it's exhausting. It is exhausting. On the other hand, I surprised, unless I'm being tricked on a daily basis, I'm surprised how little awfulness has happened, at least that we're aware of around some of this stuff. I'm kind of shocked. Actually.
I mean, a lot of it is just like veggie superheroes, like I posted on, like the guy who just turns into broccoli. Like, I don't know. A lot of it is just sort of whatever. I mean, you can call it slop because it is just content, but it's not particularly useful or damaging in a lot of cases. You know, it's just stuff.
Yeah.
It's like trinkets, but for the internet. You know, like you got that, everybody has that aunt who just has all the stuff and you're like, you know, you don't have any shelf space, but you ask for picture frames for Christmas. It's like the same thing. Like we don't need any more stuff flashing at us, but we invented this thing that makes a lot of stuff super fast.
Yeah, I think the scary thing is, you know, with the quality of tools available to us, it's not that a bunch of people need to do bad things. It's that one person needs to do something really bad. And you know, when we've all learned over the last 20 years, thanks to social media, that every single person has an audience of everyone, that it's, you know, the opportunity for damage is high. So I guess we'll see.
Well, I will close with, with two things. One, what's your prediction for what will separate successful transformations from failed ones in 2026?
I think successful transformations will be slower than the CEO wants. I think they will be well televised internally. And I mean, not to be like silly because of the topic of this conversation, but they will have the HR team involved from day zero. And again, it's just like, I mean, back to like your very first question, like my perspective on this part of the org is just like so incredibly different than it was when I came into it thinking it was just about compliance. I mean, it's no organization is starting, I hope not, is starting to think about this today. But if they were, I would say, get your HR team involved immediately, as much or more than your tech team. And plan on it taking 10 times longer than you think the AI magic button takes to push. And plan on being really honest about what you don't know and what you do know with your organization. And I think if somebody were to do all those things right now, I think they might even catch up and surpass where some organizations are right now that are still thinking about it as, you know, as we're rolling out Gmail. And it's not the same thing at all. So
probably nobody's starting today, but let's just say they were for a second. And as HR leader, they got to start their AI journey tomorrow. What advice are you giving them?
I would say trust your gut for sure. I would say your job is more important than you probably realize it is. I would say the very first thing you should do, to the extent that your organization doesn't understand what you do or the value you bring, make that the first thing in your to-do list. I think that'll be key to success versus failure of AI in your org for sure.
All right. Well, we almost did an hour.
Excellent.
Thanks for coming on. We'll have to do this again sometime.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, David.
All right, listeners, until next time, as always, head on over to People Managing People, sign up for the newsletter, check out our AI Transformation Explorer, check out our upcoming events, and as always, to be ready for the next pod. And until next time,